Evening.
So, funnily enough, the last time I actually saw you was at Glastonbury. Me and my friends had stumbled into this tent on the Thursday and we're having a great time, some proper good bangers, and then we look up and you're DJing, you're behind the decks, and I was like, I know him.
Yeah. What's happening? Yeah. So yeah, it was, my friends Dan and James were technically DJing, but okay. I was kind of in control of the vibes, I think, like picking...
really got that impression.
Yeah. Why don't you play, Outer Space next and stuff like that?
I think that's literally the one when I came up to you, yeah.
Classic. Yeah.
But you weren't just there half DJing, you actually also had some work in Silver Haze, and I think it's maybe a bit of a lesson known part of your creative interest is that you're really into music and it's often intersects with your creative work. I'd just love to start off by asking how that's happened and why you love music so much.
So I was at Glastonbury with War Child, so that was a kind of fantastic opportunity. But I've always, I suppose, rewind to when I was like 12, 13 years old, I first started getting into music. And I bought Kraftwerk, Man Machine. That was like the first record I bought. It was a kind of, and just to have that kind of combination of imagery and music together was, it just kind of took me to a different place. And I think, so I was into like drawing logos of my favourite bands, like Adam and the Ants and people like that, and kind of, it kind of took me away into a different place, really. And I think it was that I kind of wanted to be in that place where this amazing stuff came from.
Yeah, lovely. And you said that you actually ended up designing Kraftwerk's website.
I did, yes. Yeah, that was kind of like late 90s when I was doing website stuff with my brother-in-law, Kip. Mm-hmm. So Kip was the first person I knew who was on the internet. So I used to go around to his flat and look at the internet. And he said, we could design a website and put it, online. I was like, yeah, great. So we didn't have a scanner or anything. So I drew all the designs in MS Paint on a PC. And then we made this website called Get Jet Set. Mm-hmm. And we called ourselves Friendship. So it was a name that we nicked off the back of a Kraftwerk album. So we launched our website. It was like demon./ it's like one of those massive HTMLs. And then we got an email from somebody in New York saying, would you like to pitch to design a website for a German electronic music band? I said, is this German electronic music band Kraftwerk by any chance? And she emailed back and said, yeah, it's Kraftwerk. So I'd kind of had, like, my entire life had been preparing me for this moment. So I kind of put together this kind of rudimentary website. And they loved it. So sehr gut.
That is very impressive. I can't wait to tell my dad. You mentioned previously that you were working with War Child at Glastonbury and you've worked with other music charities like Music Declares and other ones that aren't music-focused, Grenfell projects, Oxfam and many other causes. Why is it so important for you to align yourself and your work with these causes and communities?
I think, kind of like looking back at my work, it's kind of grounded in that language of protest. So when I tell people about my work, I kind of look at the suffragettes and kind of civil rights era protests in America, and kind of going through the 70s and kind of CND and all those kind of like really vital, important uses of graphic design. And I really love graphic design, and I love visual communication, and I think when it's allied to those kind of messages and amplifying those kind of voices, I think that's when it kind of serves a purpose and it feels meaningful. So it's something that yeah, I feel really strongly about, and yeah, I just want to be in that space where the work that I make is, you know, is for the good of people.
And I feel like although you can obviously engage with quite emotional and quite weighty topics, there is this pervasive sense of positivity that runs through everything you do. Would you say this comes naturally to you, or you have to sort of purposely manifest that?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of annoyingly optimistic. You know, I always think, you know, things are going to kind of sort themselves out and things are going to be okay. And, you know, there's always a kind of way through things. And, you know, it's kind of, especially at the moment, you know, it's difficult to kind of find optimism in the world. And I think I think humans are kind of naturally optimistic creatures, you know, and I think we kind of connect through optimism and, you know, through joy and happiness and, you know, yeah, much less than the things that sort of divide us, you know, the sort of, you know, all the bad stuff. So yeah, I think that it's kind of like just naturally in my work, I think, and sort of an extension of me as a person.
So maybe the pinnacle of this positivity and what people may succumb to is your piece, Work Hard and Be Nice to People. It's 21 years since that piece was born, arguably your most famous. And I've heard that there's a great story behind the seed of that manifesto. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I was in the queue in Sainsbury's on Clapham High Street. Shout out to Clapham High Street. Yeah, when we used to live there, and there's an old lady in front of me in the queue, and she was just getting her shopping, and she was chatting to the woman on the till as well, and she was just saying, "Now, you know, the secret to a happy life is to work hard and be nice to people." And I was like, "Oh, that's." It was just one of those phrases that I kind of remembered, and then. My family and I, we moved down to Rye in East Sussex, and I found this amazing letterpress printers, Adams of Rye. And they had like an amazing letterpress room that was kind of pretty much untouched. And it just felt like that phrase and Adams kind of connected in some way. So I'd asked them to print it for me. And we printed like a few hundred copies, and I sent them out to friends, and then gradually it kind of got more traction, then started selling copies for 20 quid each, bargain, because they're all letterpress, and it was, I think my genius move was making it an open edition. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we're well over maybe like 100,000 copies of it now. Yeah, amazing. Do the math.
And the rest is history. Going back to the supermarket, I love this kind of idea of you going about and like collecting words and collecting phrases, but it seems like this collecting has always come quite naturally to you. I saw that you, when you were younger, some of your earliest memories of words and print was collecting bus tickets and various ephemera when travelling with your granddad. What do you think was that initial thing that drew you to these quite simple everyday things and what they represented?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, because my granddad retired and he wanted to travel, and I was kind of hanging around, and he was like, oh, you know, so he took me with him, and we just went on these amazing journeys. Yeah, this is kind of like mid-70s to kind of like mid-80s. So we went to like China and Russia and kind of, you know, just travelled all over Europe. And I just used to collect like scrapbooks full of stuff, of like tickets and bits of ephemera. It's just as souvenirs, really. And then I'd kind of bring them home and kind of like have them in little books and like with the photographs and things like that. So it's just a kind of, and I think being exposed at that young age to, you know, kind of like different visual signage and, you know, just the amazing amount of visual information I was kind of looking at was, yeah, it definitely went in somewhere.
So, on the subjects of words, I came along to one of your workshops a little while ago, and I'd signed up because all the others were very creative and hands-on. And I was like, oh, words, it was all doing things with words. I was like, I can do that, I'm a writer. And then I actually found it like, incredibly difficult and couldn't do it. Because it was all about thinking about words in a different way and not in the correct way. And I found that really interesting. So I'd just love to know, when you've collected these words, what's your process of turning them into something and going, yeah, that's what's going on that poster?
Yeah, I think it's, again, it's like the kind of collecting thing and thinking about words as found objects. So things that already exist. It's like all my work is built out of like pre-existing things, really. So looking at words and the kind of meaning and the sort of like abstract form as well, and how they look typographically. So yeah, all those things kind of work and somehow just almost like reveal themselves to me. You know, I don't kind of sit down and think, right, I'm going to think of a little phrase now or something. It's kind of stuff that kind of comes out of conversation or some experience that I've had with, you know, along the way, or something I've seen written on a wall, or yeah, anything really. And I think it's about observation and looking at the world, you know, kind of like trying to soak up information. You know, it's like being in this incredible space. You know, this is, you know, the kind of sense of history in this space. And yeah, it's kind of stuff like that that's kind of quite indefinable, but becomes really powerful.
So you just sort of let it marinate and come to you over time?
Yeah, that's the idea. Whenever I try and think of something, it always kind of doesn't feel 100% right. It just has to kind of come, you know, for like a moment of clarity almost, you know. It's going back to Glastonbury.
So we've talked a lot about the words and the phrases. I'd love to like get into the nitty-gritty of the visual. What is it that you love about the letterpress medium, and do you remember your first ever interaction with it?
Yeah, the first time I ever did it was a summer job that my dad lined up for me. So it was a friend of his was a commercial printer, and I went along for, you know, to kind of like see what they were doing and everything. And they were printing beer mats using letterpress. So they had these two plates, I think one for like red and the other one for green, and just seeing the material go onto the press and then come out and be printed, I was like fascinated by it. And I think that's the first time I'd seen anything physically being printed like that. And I think it's another one of those kind of quite formative memories, really. And then I think going to college, so when I was at the Royal College, Alan Kitching was the letterpress tutor. And the letterpress department was down Exhibition Road. It was part of the V&A. So I used to go down there to escape from the other tutors and kind of just get on like with mucking about with type, really, and kind of printing out letter forms and kind of creating overlays and textures and stuff.
Wow. And you've also said there's something about this idea of restriction, and that doesn't only, you know, translate in the letterpress, it's also in your use of colour. You quite rarely go beyond anything other than two colours or really black and white.
Yeah.
What is it about restriction that you think really helps your work grow?
Yeah, I think, you know, just having, because I kind of grew up in an analogue era, I've definitely got an analogue brain. So I kind of see things in a very particular way, you know, kind of. So I think stuff like that kind of came out of necessity, really. So I worked on a photocopier to make my work when I was at college, and, you know, to print more than 2 or 3 colours was just, seemed ridiculous, really. So, you know, you could have like coloured paper and print on it in black, and, you know, just kind of like having those like real simple restrictions. And I think now, we've all got computers, and kind of you've got about 1 million different alternatives, but still, I think when you reduce things down to their core elements and, you know, reduce things to the simplicity, you know, most simple kind of version, really, I think that's when it becomes the most powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say you're, you know, sort of analog at heart, because you're certainly not afraid or averse to technology. a brilliant project last year, I think, with Oswin Tickler, where there was a book and printed of these experiments you did where you mixed letterpress with creative coding. I'd be interested to know, especially in the current climate, how do you think technology and analog creativity can sort of synthesize and become one rather than fighting against each other, really?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's like the previous two talks, both people were showing work that ended up being part of the physical world, and I think just actually making work that doesn't solely exist on screen is really important as well, to kind of see work out on the street, whether it's kind of like a printed flyer or a poster or something. And I think for me, that kind of sort of connects with the history of visual communication. It's like the ultimate for me is like to design a poster, or to put some text onto a piece of paper and put it out into the world. But yeah, things are changing, and who knows? But I think we're all humans, aren't we? And we all like to kind of mess things up, and even though we're kind of like feels like we're being forced down a road where technology is going to take over, and we're just going to not necessarily be completely part of the creative process. But I think there are enough people who will kind of reject that and kind of carry on making work, in an analog way.
Is that optimism coming through?
Yeah, we'll be fine. It's fine. But I remember telling my wife that the internet was like, it's never going to take off. And I think history proved me right on that.
I think so. So another one of your pieces that I love is think of your own ideas. Obviously, as we mentioned, your work has been subject to a fair few copies. Is this a little bit of a jab, or is it just a bit of a manifesto for people to think big and think beyond trends?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's kind of both, really. I think it's. I think with a lot of my stuff, you can kind of read it in a few different ways, definitely. And it's, the first way is like the angry, like, think of your own ideas. And then it's like the other one is like, wait, why don't you think of your own ideas? It's kind of, and it's like, it's however you want to read it, really. So yeah, it's definitely, maybe it was a response to like people, kind of appropriating what I'd done as well. But yeah, I'm quite relaxed about that stuff, really. Because it
came, was it the second one after Work Hard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started, yeah. It was kind of like, actually the one I did directly after Work Hard was It's Okay for Me to Have Everything I Want. Which some people took, to mean literally. And it was more, it was like a kind of comment about stuff, but I think it kind of landed slightly wrongly. So I kind of gently withdrew that one.
I was going to say, I don't think I've seen that one.
No, you wouldn't have.
So you've, had on that very long and successful career, and managed to sort of evolve, stay really relevant, and just keep experimenting. What advice would you give to people who are maybe at a similar point, entering the midpoint of their career, maybe feeling a bit lost and just wondering, how do I keep afloat of all these changes, all these different things?
Yeah. I think it's kind of when you in your kind of late 30s, hit kind of around 40. That's when it kind of hit for me, really. And I was like, I don't want to work for idiot art directors for the rest of my life. Who'd be like, oh, can you move that a little bit to the right? It's like, no, I don't want to do that. And it was almost like Work Hard and Be Nice People was the kind of saviour, really, because I started to get, be able to sell copies of that. Mm-hmm. And it kind of created a kind of, kind of like an income, really, which was fun. and I think it was like I'd kind of reached that point where I wanted to do more stuff, like for me, and kind of stuff that felt meaningful. And I think that's when I started working, more with kind of like charity stuff and kind of getting involved in things like that, really. And it just kind of naturally evolved, and it became part of what I did, and it kind of grew in different ways. And it's like I sort of didn't really do much of the kind of branding stuff, or kind of working with kind of big clients so much, and it just kind of forced me to kind of like find different ways of kind of working and kind of moving forward, and kind of producing my own stuff, and then and it all kind of just happened, really.
And it sort of makes me think your work hasn't just lived on the page. You've done many different formats, but there's obviously the Me and You in Leeds, which is on the side of a building, and as you've probably seen, skateboards. Yeah. Did this sort of come from the desire for you to just see your work in different places?
Yeah, I think so. It's it's like with the Leeds mural, that kind of came out of Laura Wellington. She runs lots of great projects up in Leeds. I studied there. I did my degree up in Leeds, mm-hmm. And there was this kind of vacant gable end of a building. So I kind of made the design, and then it was kind of painted on there, and it kind of, the ambition was to kind of make a landmark for the city, and it's kind of happened, and it's kind of, it's those ideas of like placemaking, and not necessarily, I don't know, just kind of connecting lots of kind of threads through one piece of work. And I think working at scale as well, that's something I've always wanted to do. More, bigger, and more amazing work, please.
And what is the significance for you having that in Leeds, where you studied, but also in the north of England, having, big pieces of, like you were saying, placemaking art and this creativity going out to these countries above London?
Yeah. Well, as you can tell, I'm from the north, and it's kind of, it kind of shaped my character, and it shaped who I am as a person. And I think part of that kind of upbringing was about communication with people as well, and kind of connecting with people. And I think the written word's kind of really important part of that. So yeah, and I think it's well, people from the north are nice, aren't they?
They're very. I can corroborate. They are very nice. I think I might go on to some audience questions, because we've had some really brilliant ones in. Just let me get there. So we've got one from Dia. How important is readability when it comes to type-heavy projects, especially when using type as the primary graphic visual piece or project?
Yeah, well, for me, it's kind of, sometimes I kind of like to play around with legibility a bit, and kind of, experiment with kind of like cropping off type, and, kind of like illustrate a meaning or something like that. But words are really powerful, and typography is really powerful, and I think it should be legible, and you should be able to understand what, kind of what's being said. But it's kind of, but I suppose it's kind of a byproduct of the way that I work. I use lots of kind of high contrast black and white, and kind of simple bold typefaces. I suppose it's kind of, it lends itself to a kind of legibility. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a great one from Lucia, which I think is in response to the postcards that we've got on the seats.
Oh yes. Make sure you pick them up.
What question are you trying to answer through your work?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Lucia, for that one. I think all the questions are kind of questions, like all the work really is the messages to myself primarily. It's like things that I need to reinforce, or to kind of think about, or to kind of to be sort of present in my kind of physical realm, really, I suppose. I think, yeah, the question I'm always asking is what's going to come next, and how can I sort of progress, and how can I kind of get my work into different places, and where can I make the work feel meaningful and engage with people.
Lovely. And this one I'm actually really intrigued to know the answer. It's from Rishi. How do you feel about all lowercase letters in a sentence?
Yeah. Well spotted. Yeah, apparently there are these things called lowercase letters, but I've never encountered one in my entire life. No. Yeah, I'm definitely on the uppercase team.
Yeah. It's funny, they're saying that Gen Z don't like capital letters. They're all using lowercase.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You make me feel old now.
So I think, just a final one from me to round things up. What do you believe, from your perspective, from your viewpoint, the future of letterpress and print work looks like? Has there been anything that you've seen recently that's really excited you, and how do you think it might live on?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like letterpress can be a little bit kind of a kind of closed world where, there's a kind of, whatever you print in letterpress looks great, so it doesn't really matter what you're saying through the work. But for me, letterpress is really connected with the history of design and the history of communication, essentially. So I think when you do commit something to print, it has to be meaningful and it has to connect with people. And I think I've kind of taken letterpress, the kind of visual language of it, and kind of taken it into different places. And I think it needs to expand and kind of change. And I think because it's about connecting with people, and letterpress is from a different era, it's from a different time, and there's a kind of perceived authenticity about it, I think. And those typefaces weren't designed by type designers, they were designed by lettering people, and it's kind of got a kind of, it feels like it's from a different time. And I think that's something that it kind of feels different to what's happening in the moment. So I think that's why it kind of stands out a bit, really. But I do lots of workshops, and when people come into contact with letterpress and understand the physicality of it, then I think it makes you kind of value words, because it's really hard to set some really nice bit of type. It takes an afternoon to set a sentence and make it look good. So I think it helps you to understand what words mean, really, and the meaning that we get from words.
Lovely. And anything you're particularly excited about? Any creatives or?
I'm kind of, I don't know, I think secretly, like most creatives, we only really like our own work. Yeah. And you see other people's stuff and you kind of think, yeah, it's all right. But there are lots of great people doing lots of amazing things. Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of, but yeah, I've got to be truthful on this one.
And maybe just one final one, just because it's its birthday. With Work Hard, what would you say is the one thing you've taken from a piece just growing a life of its own and becoming something so momentous in the creative industry?
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it was just another thing that I made and kind of put out into the world. And yeah, I'm always going to be known as the work hard and be nice to people guy. No matter what I do, for the rest of my life, that's going to be my epitaph, really. And I think it's true. Yeah. We should all work hard and be nice to people. Exactly. But work hard in a good way, not just like working hard for the sake of it. Kind of work hard at like making every day count, and just being nice to people.
Perfect. What a brilliant one to end on. Amazing. I think that's all we've got time for.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you.